Hi, folks. Welcome to Crisco's Corner. Unfiltered commentary. Not your truth, the real truth. Please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thank you for your support. Welcome back. A little change of pace here in Crisco's Corner. An interview with Sarah Chrisman. She's the author of the fictional series, The Tales of Chetzemoka, as well as other nonfiction books concerning the Victorian era. The Tales of Chetzemoka takes place in the late 1800s in the Pacific Northwest. And it was a real pleasure talking to Sarah. We had a great conversation. And this is part 1 of 3 with Sarah Chrisman, author of The Tales of Chetzemoka. A link to her Amazon page to buy her books, and I strongly suggest you do. I've read them all. And also a link to her YouTube page. And I hope you enjoy it. Today on Crisco's Corner, I want to welcome a very special guest, author Sarah A. Chrisman. She is the author of many Victorian-era books, both fiction and nonfiction. Her latest book, Sparks Press, is just released. You can buy on Amazon. Now, all these links I'm going to leave in the description below for those of you listening on YouTube. And she also has a YouTube channel called Sarah Chrisman, which I watch all the time. It's great. And her website is thisvictorianlife.com, which I'll also leave a link in the description on YouTube. So we're going to talk about her new book, Sparks Press. It's number 7 in the series, The Tales of Chetzemoka. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I've been practicing. It's number 7, and so I want to welcome Sarah. You're one of my favorite authors, and right now I'm in the middle of book 6, Three Women a Wheel. The ladies are in the barn contemplating their personal relationships, and that's where I left it off.
Aw.
So anyway, welcome to Crisco's Corner.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
How are things in Port Townsend? That's for those of you listening, that's in the Northwest, not too far from Seattle.
Yeah. If you picture Washington State, fist thumb cocked out, Port Townsend is right at the tip of the thumb.
Ah, okay.
We're on the edge of the Olympic Peninsula.
Oh, good.
And it's been a challenging year for everybody, I think, and I think that's true all over the globe. But
I think you're being kind.
Diplomatic. But at least we had some decent weather for Christmas. That was nice.
Well, it was funny here about a week ago. We got about 4 feet of snow in upstate New York. It was one of those freak storms. And we got almost 4 feet. And then a week later, it turned 40, 50 degrees and most of it melted. So it was crazy.
Wow.
But,
Wow.
I want to talk a little bit about yourself. You live with your husband, Gabriel, who I think is a cool guy, by the way, in Port Townsend. Can you tell us a little bit about your lifestyle? I know some people aren't familiar with it, so maybe you can explain it before we get into the book.
Well, the thing is, I'll start with a bit of etymology.
Okay.
If you look at the word museum, our English word museum comes from the Greek word for a temple to the muses. So a museum is a place to receive inspiration. And my husband and I have always felt that a home should be a sacred space to receive inspiration as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And so our home is in some ways a museum. We collect a lot of different antique artifacts from the 19th century, and we don't just collect them to put them up on a shelf and fetishize them.
Right.
We collect them to use them. So our stove is an antique stove from 1900. And it's a wood-burning stove. I bake all our bread in it.
And I've seen it on your videos. And people, please watch it because she's really good with it.
It cooks good food. It's not hard to. It's funny. I give more credit to the stove than to myself. It's surprisingly easy to use. And we use antique oil lamps for lighting, which gives us a much different perspective on the season. I read books written in the 19th century. The room I'm sitting in right now is pretty much lined with bookshelves. And my husband is a librarian, and then in his spare time, he makes bicycles that are replicas of bicycles from the 1890s.
Yes, I've seen them on one video there. He's very skilled at that kind of thing. Anybody that is looking for a replica or has an older bike that needs repairs, get a hold of Gabriel. He's the man.
Thank you. He'll appreciate you saying that.
Could he tell? Because he had a video where he had the bike he was talking about, but he couldn't say what TV or movie it was supposed to be for. Did he ever?
Ah,
Did he ever?
well,
Did that ever come out?
the thing is, they don't want us to publicize it before they start publicizing it,
Yeah.
and their schedule got
Oh, yeah.
their
Okay.
schedule
Yeah.
got kicked out of whack by all that's been going on this
Yeah,
year,
of
which is
course.
rather unfortunate.
Of course, because I'm a huge period piece fan, just like you. I find the Victorian era, just the aesthetics of it and the social part of it. And it was as I was a little boy, and I'm 64, so maybe I'm old enough to be in a museum. I don't know. We'll see. But I've always been drawn to it. It's just weird since I was a small boy, like 6, 7, 8 years old. I've always thought it was fascinating, the brass and the wood and the craftsmanship and how people interact with each other. I was just fascinated by it all.
Such a dynamic time, too. It's a time out of which a lot of our modern world evolved.
Oh,
A
absolutely.
lot of the technology people are still using today got started on its road to being produced in the 19th century.
Oh, absolutely. You had the one episode concerning their version of Amazon, where you've ordered by mail.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
I was a little boy. I was born in '56, so this is probably early '60s. My mother would pull out the Sears catalog, and she says, "Listen,
Uh-huh.
take out 10 items you want from the one you want the most or the one you want the least. They won't be able to get them all, maybe, but list them." We took out the Sears catalog, and we leaf through it just like you were doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the old Sears catalogs are amazing resources for just seeing the everyday life of the past. And you can get them from all the different years that Sears was producing them. So they're a nice
Oh,
little window
okay.
into all these different times.
I got a kick out of the picture you had where they used to mail children. That was kind of funny.
Yeah, that was kind of fun. That was the post office doing a bit of a publicity stunt because it started out the first live animals that could be shipped through the mail were bees.
Oh, okay.
And then people started pushing the boundaries a bit. And then one of the really common things to get through the mail as a live animal was chickens. You
Oh,
can get baby chickens through the mail because when they hatch, they've still got the yolk sac from their egg inside of them. So they don't need to eat or drink for the first day. So they travel well. And then people, they were just playing around with, again, pushing the boundaries. And at one point, some mailman's relative said, "Hey, so and so, could
oh,
you
okay.
bring little such and such to her grandparents,
Yeah.
and it'd be fun to do this." And the mailman relative said, "Sure, why not?" And
Yeah.
so he put little so and so in his mail sack.
It's funny. I've actually heard of that. I was thinking, I saw some when you did a couple of videos on your YouTube channel considering Port Townsend, which basically let me see if I may say this right. Zamoka is basically Port Townsend. And you go around and see the old buildings, and I'll tell you, that was great. You
Yeah.
walk around those old buildings like that and know what was going on when they were first built and like that. Does that give you any kind of inspiration?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a lot of my scenes in my stories, because the town of Chetzemoka is basically Port Townsend.
All right.
When I'm writing a scene, I'll often take my notebook out to where the scene takes place and write it in place, write it in the place where the scene is happening, so that I can get all the details right.
Okay.
And a lot of time, that'll give me extra ideas, not just extra details to add color to the scene, but extra ideas. One of the examples that comes to mind is in the third book in my series, A Rapping at the Door, which is
Oh,
this
right. Yeah, the one with the
story
yeah.
where the main character is trying to expose a phony spiritualist who's
Yep.
trying to
Yep.
cheat someone.
I like the explanation of spiritualism at the beginning because people don't really realize that was a thing back then.
Yeah. Yeah. So spiritualism was a big thing in the 19th century, and there are still followers of it. And I don't want to get us off on too much of a tangent, but
Oh,
just to
no.
explain a little for
Right.
people who might not know about it.
Sure.
The basic idea is that, okay, it's very, very complicated, and this is a gross oversimplification, but
That's okay.
the basic idea is that it is possible to communicate with those who have passed on.
Right.
And there are a lot of people who still follow this as a religion. There were a lot of people in the 19th century who followed this as a religion. Besides the legitimate followers, there were also fraudsters and charlatans who didn't necessarily believe in the religious tenets of that faith, but they used it to cheat people out of money or other resources.
Yeah, their emotions and their feelings. Yeah.
So in book 3, there's a case where a fraudulent spiritualist comes to town, and she's trying to cheat someone. She's trying to cheat one of the main characters. And Nurse McCoy, who is our plucky Appalachian heroine, is trying to expose the fraud.
Yeah, and
so she has to hunt down the place where this fraudulent spiritualist is staying while she's in town. And so she tracks her down to the Bishop Hotel, which is a real place.
What I thought, that's where I got, when I saw you going up the stairs in the Bishop Hotel, that's what made me think, what a beautiful place.
It really is. It really is. And it was here in the 19th century already. And the old office, so that what they're currently using as the office used to be sort of a lounge. The old office is still upstairs. It's just an extra little room. And so when I went into there and I got to see the wainscoting on the walls, I realized that the wainscoting on the walls in there has pomegranates on it.
Oh, right.
Now, pomegranates are, in classical mythology, they're a symbol of the realm of the dead. It's the story of Persephone going down to the underworld and eating the pomegranate seeds.
I got you. Okay.
And so that was just this wonderful serendipitous tie-in to the story I was writing about this fraudulent spiritualist who tried to sell people on this idea of communicating with the dead, that of course she would stay in this hotel because she saw that inside as a sign.
Yeah, I know. I was in last November. I was in Lynchburg, Virginia, and I got to see the chapel right by Washington Lee College, and that's where Robert E. Lee is buried underneath. And it's all original woodwork inside, and his stone is, it looks like a coffin, but he's laid below. It's a sculpture of him, and just, it's all intact. It's all perfect. And I'm sitting there. I was the only person in the whole church. And I went, this is cool. I mean, you think differently. It's weird.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so continuing on up those stairs, I realized when I was actually there in the place, not only is room 13 right at the top of that staircase with the stylized pomegranates, which again was perfect, but also down the hall is the old office with its brass grill in the front.
Oh, boy.
And it was fun just imagining that scene of bold, plucky Nurse McCoy with her tail in a tizzy going after this fraudster and coming up and demanding of the poor, unfortunate guy in the office that she needs to find this woman. And the cover story that Nurse McCoy has come up with, because if she just goes around saying, I have to find this woman, she's a terrible woman, she knows people aren't necessarily going to want to help her right away because, she's feisty. She's obviously got a bee in her bonnet about something. But the cover story she's giving out is, I'm a nurse, which is true. I need to find this woman because she is a quarantine risk. She's going to infect everybody. And so then, of course, everybody wants to help her. But the office worker is edging away from the brass grill as he's talking to her.
Those of you that haven't read Sarah's fiction series, Tales of Chesamoka, McCoy is one of my favorite characters. Please do read them because they're really cool. And she's about as subtle as a train wreck. So she's old school and she speaks plain English and she keeps people in line. And my father's side of the family were all old school Italians. We call them off the boat Italians. And they're just like they don't mince words at all. You know exactly where you stand at any given moment. But yeah, I saw that, and I saw the buildings around there, and this kind of ties in what I'm going to ask you next. That you seem to spend a lot of time, I think, on the personalities of different characters because they are all different.
Yeah.
Are they based on anybody you know, or, you have to say names, but just people in general or just personalities from people being people, or how do you go about that?
Well, it's a really complex interweaving of a lot of things.
Right.
So, in terms of, yes, there definitely are elements of people I've known. There's a lot of my grandmother in Nurse McCoy.
Well, it sounds like my grandmother. That's why, yeah.
Yeah. And besides that, there are certain requirements of different stories that come into play. Nurse McCoy is a nurse because that was how she comes into the whole series. She comes in as a hired nurse, hired by this hypochondriac to be a servant.
Right,
And
yeah.
that in and of itself influenced her personality too, because a nurse has to be very capable physically. A nurse has to be well read, even if she is from a hard scrabble background. She has to be educated in a very specific way. And so that affected her personality.
Yeah.
And then also, there is a lot of research into people of the time that go into a lot of my different characters. So, for example, with Nurse McCoy, whenever I come across a really feisty, so I do a lot of reading in primary sources. I do a lot of reading in books and magazines that were actually written in the 19th century. And whenever I come across a really feisty retort or feisty comeback
Oh,
or just a
okay,
really
okay.
punchy way of expressing something
Right.
that I think, that's something Nurse McCoy would say. Then I write that down for myself in in the notebook that I will later use to write a given manuscript. And then when I go to write the manuscript, I've got all my notes and my whole list of all the things I want to work in for Nurse McCoy to say and all the things that are going to form her personality.
Right. It's
And
funny.
at the same time, I also hunt down antique photographs that are anonymous photographs that I can use as inspiration for what these characters look like.
Yeah,
And
you were saying that one time where you were going through hundreds and hundreds and thousands of pictures, and you were looking for a particular. You just know when you see it. You just my favorite's Kitty at the Ally
yeah,
character. She's my favorite character, but it's just funny. You just know, like when you had was it Silas? When you saw the picture of him, to go, oh yeah, that's
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Kitty is another fun character because in the 19th century in Port Townsend, there actually was a dressmaker here named Pussy Butler.
yeah. You were saying, yeah,
Yeah, but Pussy Butler just sounded a little too much like a Bond girl.
yeah, or some other type. We'll leave it at that. But
Yeah, I just thought a modern audience wouldn't necessarily go for a Pussy Butler.
yeah.
But Kitty is short for Catherine, and I thought that was acceptable to modern
Now,
audiences.
of the guys, how did you come about with the guys? I know there's the doctor that came in town, and then the new bicycle shop. See, I don't want to go into details because I want people to read the books, but
Sure.
how did you
So,
manage to figure out which one is which and who ends up being the love interest? That's kind of interesting.
well, with the guys, it's very helpful to be a happily married woman because my husband has been wonderful and very helpful in helping me write the masculine characters.
Oh, okay.
And he always, at the end, so my process, I write my manuscripts by hand, and at the end of every day, I'll type up what I've written that day, and then I let my husband read it over supper. And when it comes to the male characters, especially, he'll often tell me, well, I don't think a man would put it quite this way, or I don't think this man would put it
Right,
quite this
right,
way. I
right.
think it would be this other way. And so that's a very valuable resource to have
Yeah, and
a male perspective.
that's one thing lately that people don't realize that even though we can do equal things, men and women are different and they think differently and they perceive things differently, and that's just the way nature is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the important thing is to empower each other by pointing out all our different strengths.
Right.
And
Kind of dovetail together, and when one lacks, the other one picks up, and it makes for really good. I haven't been
yeah,
married for a long time. I was married for 7 years. I have a couple of kids, but I know the relationship part of it, and it's very important.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And in terms of having different strengths, that's why there are different categories in the Olympics for men and women.
Right.
We're just good at different things,
Yeah.
and that's fine.
Yeah.
That's what makes up the world.
Oh,
That's
absolutely. And like I said, the characters and some of the guys I really like. They're interesting characters to be sure.
oh, Thanks. Thanks.
You can
They're a lot
tell,
of fun.
you took a lot of time, I could tell, because they're the same and they're different at the same time, just like people. It was interesting how you did that.
Yeah. And again, the characters, they're a complex interweaving of things from people I've known, things from characters in 19th century books, things from books about actual people in the 19th century, and even some details from diaries written in the 19th century, again, of real people. And there's also the exigencies of the story.
Right,
So,
right,
for example, the character of Ken came about, Addie's brother, because a lot of women got into cycling because their brothers were into cycling.
right.
And so it was necessary for the storyline for the romantic heroine of book 2 to have sort of a happy-go-lucky brother who was already in the cycling club.
Oh, okay.
And then from that, he became a character in and of himself later on in the series
Well,
because,
it's funny you say that because about a year ago or so, I used to watch your videos, and we were talking about bicycles. Somebody pulled up in front. I have a convenience store, and I have a video room and a chess club out back. We meet once a week for a chess club, and there was a guy with a bike, and he was saying it was really ridiculous that a guy's bike has a bar in it and a woman's doesn't because of obviously physical differences. And I went, no, 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 no. They're cut that way because that's where the skirt goes. He goes, how do you know that? I says, oh, I found it on YouTube. You know. And he looked at me like, how did you know that? I went, well, I just know, that's all.
aw,
That was,
glad I could help you
yeah. Because I always wondered, I've always wondered that myself. I says, physically between men and women, that makes no sense. And then you think about the skirt part and go, oh, okay, all right, now it makes sense.
Yeah. Another reason for that is because on average, men tend to be bigger and heavier than women.
Right.
And that bar across the top strengthens the frame.
Yep.
The diamond frame is a very strong structure. A woman's bike doesn't need to be structurally as strong because on average, women tend to be smaller.